Thank you so much for joining us here again on the show. This is Business Nigeria. Let's head on now to our second conversation. The importance of manufacturing has always been recognized because of its economic stabilization capacity to stimulate favorable trade balances, job and wealth creation potentials. And without a growing manufacturing sector, the country will always have huge dependence on imports, and fluctuations in oil price crashes will continue to result in FX scarcity, economic shocks and depreciation. In recent years, the manufacturing sector's contribution to Nigeria's gross domestic product, GDP, has been hovering around 9% mark, which is quite below the double-digit benchmark for attaining the developed industrialization status. The trend confirmed that previous efforts at fully industrializing Nigeria through manufacturing is not yielding the desired results due to the existence of binding constraints in the economy, such as poor economic infrastructure and high-cost operating environment. Well, let's get to dissect some of the challenges perhaps responsible for the seemingly lackluster performance and low competitiveness in the manufacturing sector over the years. My guest is the Deputy President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa. Thank you indeed, Mr. Idahosa, for agreeing to speak with us as always here on Business Nigeria.
Thank you.
Yes, so just as we have pointed out, maybe we should get things started on that note around the statistics around how the manufacturing sector is faring in terms of the gross domestic products or contributions to the GDP. 9%, is that good enough for the economy that has been tagged or once tagged as the giant of Africa?
It's not anywhere near good enough. For any modern economy the size of Nigeria, certainly we are still in the infancy of developing a manufacturing sector. Essentially, we are very much in the infancy. And it's going to take some work to be done to really build a manufacturing sector that is occupying its proper place in a modern Nigerian economy.
But then as well, does that also put a question mark on the status that we have perhaps acquired for ourselves over the years? Some have described our economy as the biggest in the continent. Some have described our economy as well, maybe the second to South Africa. Where exactly are we in terms of that description of status in the continent? And does that also perhaps tell of how the sector is also doing here in the country?
Well, there's no doubt that Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. That's accepted by everyone, if the statistics say so. But when you're talking of manufacturing, certainly South Africa is the most advanced industrial economy in the continent because it has a very advanced manufacturing sector. So those are two things that are clear. If we are talking of the manufacturing sector, we are way behind countries like South Africa, Egypt, Morocco. Perhaps maybe we are at the same level as Kenya, but certainly we're looking at number 4 or thereabouts when it comes to manufacturing. So that's why we have a lot of work to do to build a manufacturing sector that is comparable to other economies in our level, in our space. Looking at countries in the world that are, say, 50 to 200 million in population, have the kind of size that we have, we don't rank pretty when you come to manufacturing. A lot of the growth in Nigeria and size that makes us the largest in Africa comes from other sectors, like telecoms, like agriculture, where we are much bigger than other countries. But in the manufacturing, we have our major issues that are yet to be addressed. The big one, the really big one, is power. We are yet to find a way to have uninterrupted power supply across this country that is like a minimum base for building a manufacturing industry in any country. until we are able to address that, manufacturers will continue to struggle and trying to build their own power supplies, mostly by themselves or in small clusters coming together to have a local power supply for an industrial estate. Again, it's very expensive, much more expensive than if you had public power supply that is 24 hours reliable and good for manufacturing activity. So that's the essential requirement we do not have. The other issues, infrastructural, cost of imported raw materials, but the really big one is power. With the kind of enterprising spirit that we have in this country, if we have power, Nigerians can cope with most of the other issues. The big one is power. We need to find a way to address the issue of power supply that is consistent, high quality, which you absolutely need for manufacturing. You can't have all these power cuts every 1 or 2 hours and then you have put on generators, put them off. You don't do that in manufacturing. You have to have a certain minimum base, uninterrupted, predictable, good quality power, on top of which you build everything else that becomes the manufacturing sector of the economy.
Yes, Mr. Idahosa, and I'm wondering perhaps just how that has impacted the sector these past 8 years. Has there been any sort of improvement in the current administration's handling of power and how it impacts the manufacturing sector as well?
Well, the power environment is public knowledge. We all know what our situation is. Talking about improvement is perhaps saying maybe 1 or 2 things have happened, but clearly you really cannot say, everyone in Nigeria cannot say you have had significant improvement because we are still hovering around 4,000 megawatts for a country of 200 million people. And even that 4,000 megawatts keeps going off. We keep having grid collapses once too often that any one grid collapse is bad enough, but in Nigeria we get it quite frequently. So the power is the problem. That has not really improved, and until it improves, the manufacturing sector will continue to struggle. Yes. Because we are competing with other countries that have resolved that. At least the 4 countries I've mentioned: Egypt, Morocco, South Africa, Kenya. Just talking about Africa, they have managed to achieve a very high level of consistent 24-hour supply of good quality power that is good for manufacturing. So we haven't done that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Mr. Idahosa, where exactly the challenge would be. Are the major players in the manufacturing sector not doing enough to call the attention of the government? Because sometimes you hear the government say, look, we have invested this amount of monies into power. We have made such investments into power. We have done things. There's an improvement. But the manufacturers say otherwise. So where do we find the balance?
Well, it's not just the manufacturers. Every sector of Nigerian society, both business and non-business, have talked about power all the time. There's hardly any week you don't get some talk about power. And the government says we are trying. Government is trying to do certain things. There's the new Siemens project. There's a lot that the transmission company has done. A lot of incremental efforts being made here and there. But the size of the issue is so large that these incremental efforts have not shown any significant impacts. Because when you think that we need anything between 50 to 60,000 megawatts of power before you can say there's a significant base for manufacturing. And we are still struggling at 4,000 megawatts. So what manufacturers across the country have essentially done is resorting to self-help, building their own generators, building their own independent power plants for a group of industries in the cluster. That's really what is sustaining manufacturing in Nigeria. It's all mostly self-help, most on an individual or a cluster basis around industrial estates There's no manufacturer in Nigeria that can tell you that he depends even 20% on power from the public supply. There's not.
All right.
Because it's simply not there.
Well, Mr. Etahosa, we have to wind down on our conversation now. We are totally pressed for time. But let me squeeze in two questions. The first is the fact that just a moment ago, my guest pointed out something very, very disturbing. He says the Chinese and India are perhaps taking over the manufacturing sector here in the country. Maybe just a yes or no answer. Is that true? And of course, the second question is, what's your outlook for the manufacturing sector? It's the end of 2022. We are, of course, just around a new year. What's your outlook for the sector in 2023?
Well, it is true. The Chinese, Indians are here everywhere. Look at any subset of manufacturing, they are there. The outlook for manufacturing will be similar to what we have now. It will continue to struggle, but we expect that certain things could change that. One of that is the refineries under construction and being rehabilitated. If we are able to get diesel supply 100% in country, and we don't have to import diesel, that can be a source of significant improvements for manufacturing. So that's one thing that will change the game. The other thing that can change the game is if security improves to the point that farmers, commercial farming can now be done very efficiently, and the volume and cost of raw materials of manufacturing becomes very positive. That can also bring a change. But if you don't have those basic changes, the manufacturing outlook will remain flat. Pretty much a repetition of 2022. That's what you get in 2023.
All right, well, Mr. Etahosa, perhaps we may have to leave it there. Understand that we really have to go now, but I'd like to thank you most kindly. We hope that things get better. It's indeed very disturbing and worrying to see the Chinese and the Indians take over the manufacturing sector here in the country. But thank you indeed for speaking with us here on Business Nigeria.
Thank you.
Mr. Etahosa is the Deputy President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI.